They cuffed her right next to the porta-potty. Blue flashing lights bounced off the unfinished pergola while Officer Dorsey read her Miranda rights. Her hands, still clutching a crumpled stop work order she printed at home, were shaking like a leaf blower in overdrive. The officer repeated with an annoyed tone that she did not have the authority to revoke a county permit. The cement truck driver, who had just been trying to finish his pour, sipped his coffee and muttered that this was one hell of a neighborhood. I didn't respond. I was too busy admiring the fresh slab of foundation she had tried to halt, which now had her footprints immortalized in it forever. The construction crew stood around taking photos with their phones, and I heard one of them say something about this being the wildest Tuesday morning he had experienced in 20 years of construction work. My name is Gregory Holt. I am 51 years old, quiet, a hobby woodworker, and I live alone with my dog Carl. Carl is a golden retriever who barks at exactly two things: the ice cream truck and Denise Blandon. I moved to Foxbrush Hollow 5 years ago, a suburban development best known for its aggressively cheerful seasonal banners and surprisingly cutthroat bake-offs. The neighborhood newsletter once devoted 3 pages to a controversy over whether store-bought pie crusts disqualified entries from the annual pie contest. That should have been my first warning about the politics here. After years of saving and planning, I finally got approval for my backyard workshop. It would be a small, tasteful structure so I could stop storing lumber in the laundry room and quit getting sawdust in my washing machine. The plans were modest, just a 12 by 16-foot building with proper ventilation and electrical work. I had even chosen cedar siding to match the neighborhood aesthetic. Enter Denise Blandon, HOA president for the past 6 years, real estate agent with Century 21, and recreational saboteur of other people's happiness. Her hobbies include issuing fines for leaving trash bins out 8 minutes past pickup, telling new residents that Foxbrush Hollow has a mandatory mulching aesthetic that doesn't actually exist, and measuring grass height with a ruler she carries in her purse. Denise made it clear from day one that she thought a backyard workshop was a gateway to rural blight. She actually used those exact words at the HOA meeting where I first presented my plans. Despite county approval and HOA guidelines that explicitly allowed utility structures under 400 square feet, Denise began her crusade with the determination of someone who had way too much time on their hands. First came the passive-aggressive flyers distributed to every mailbox on our street. They asked if your neighbor was building a man cave or a menace. The font was Comic Sans, which told me everything I needed to know about her state of mind. She had printed them on neon green paper that probably violated her own rules about acceptable colors for community notices. My neighbor Tom told me he immediately threw his in the recycling, but not before noting that she had spelled construction wrong twice. Then came the emails to the entire HOA distribution list. She expressed concerns about property values declining by up to 30%, a number she clearly made up. She claimed that Gregory had not consulted the beautification committee, which didn't actually exist in our bylaws and seemed to be something she invented on the spot. She questioned whether zoning laws supported power tools that loud, even though I hadn't even purchased any tools yet and the workshop wasn't even built. She sent these emails at all hours, including one at 3:47 in the morning titled Urgent Action Required Regarding Unauthorized Structure. Margaret from 2 houses down replied, all asking Denise to please stop sending emails in the middle of the night. Denise responded by creating a new email list without Margaret on it. Then came the surveillance phase, which was when things got genuinely creepy. Denise was spotted crouching behind my compost bin with binoculars on a Tuesday afternoon. I waved at her from my kitchen window. She didn't wave back. Instead, she started taking photos with a camera that had a lens longer than my forearm. She left warning notes taped to my sawhorses claiming they were positioned in violation of sightline ordinances that she made up. One note was written on her personal stationery with little houses on the border, which would have been cute if the message hadn't been threatening legal action. She pestered the contractor with questions about noise thresholds and demanded to see his business license 4 separate times, even though he showed it to her each time. She called his company to verify his employment, then called the Better Business Bureau to check for complaints. When she found none, she seemed genuinely disappointed. At one point, she tried to bribe the electrician with homemade zucchini bread to walk off the job. He told me later that the bread was dry and he wouldn't have taken the bribe even if it had been good. She also offered him $200 cash, which he found insulting since the job was paying him much more than that. The plumber told me she had cornered him at the local hardware store and tried to convince him that my project was actually illegal. When he disagreed, She told him she would make sure everyone knew he did shoddy work. The plumber, who had been in business for 30 years and had an excellent reputation, just laughed at her. The real chaos hit Tuesday morning at exactly 7:23. I know because I checked my watch when I saw her marching up my driveway. Denise showed up in a high-visibility vest that she had clearly bought just for this occasion because it still had the tags on it. She was carrying a bogus HOA emergency stop order that she had laminated for some reason. The document looked like she had made it in Microsoft Word using every font available, including wingdings for what I think was supposed to be official seals. She flagged down the cement truck with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting their whole life for this moment. She stood on my property, right in the middle of where the foundation was supposed to be poured, shouting that the build was illegally invoking easement rights that had nothing to do with my project. The driver looked at me with confusion while she waved her arms like she was directing aircraft on a runway. She had brought an air horn which she used to try to get everyone's attention, but it just scared Carl, who was watching from the window. She called 911, telling the dispatcher this was an emergency situation involving unpermitted construction. The dispatcher apparently knew her well because I heard her say through the phone that construction disputes were civil matters. The rumor around the neighborhood is that Denise once tried to report a neighbor's koi pond as an unauthorized wetland and another time called about a suspicious van that turned out to be the Postal Service. The dispatcher told her that unless someone was in immediate danger, this wasn't a police matter. Denise insisted that her property values were in immediate danger, which even I had to admit was creative. Unfortunately for Denise, the county inspector was already on site for a scheduled inspection that I had arranged weeks in advance. His name was Robert, and he had been doing this job for 15 years. When he confirmed all permits were in order and that we were fully compliant with every single regulation, she snapped. Her face turned the color of the stop sign she claimed I was violating by having construction vehicles on the street. She accused Robert of being paid off, which he did not appreciate. She grabbed the inspection clipboard right out of his hands and ran across the wet concrete slab, shrieking about sovereign HOA territory and her rights as president. The inspector stood there with his mouth open while she trampled through $40,000 worth of fresh foundation work, leaving deep footprints with every step. That's when Officer Dorsey arrived in his patrol car. He had responded to Denise's calls before, and I could see the resignation on his face when he realized who had called this time. Once it was about potentially feral squirrels that turned out to be regular squirrels just trying to eat. Another time she reported flag placement violations during the 4th of July because someone's flag was 2 inches too low according to her measurements. He even responded to a call about suspicious digging that turned out to be a 10-year-old building a sandbox. This time, she wouldn't back down even when faced with an actual police officer. She demanded he issue a citation to me for disturbing the peace, even though the only person disturbing anything was her. She pointed at me and shouted with a shrill voice that I was unfit for suburban stewardship and should have my property rights revoked. The county inspector quietly asked Dorsey whether he wanted to arrest her or if he should press charges first for interfering with his official duties. The officer asked her 3 times to calm down and leave the property. Each time his voice got a little more firm. She kept yelling about her authority as HOA president superseding county permits, state law, and apparently the Constitution itself. She claimed she had called the mayor, who was a personal friend, which was interesting since our mayor had blocked her on social media after she complained about the city's choice of holiday decorations. She then said she was calling her lawyer, pulled out her phone, and called a number that went straight to voicemail because it was 7:30 in the morning. The handcuffs came out when she tried to grab the officer's citation book to write me a ticket herself. She actually reached for his belt where his equipment was, which was when Officer Dorsey had clearly reached his limit with her antics. As he placed her under arrest, she kept insisting that she had executive immunity as an HOA board member. The officer informed her that wasn't a real thing while he guided her toward the patrol car. She demanded to speak to his supervisor, the chief of police, and oddly enough, the fire chief who had nothing to do with this situation. The cement truck driver asked if he should delay the pour, but the contractor shook his head. The concrete was already mixed and the clock was ticking on its usability. Denise was charged with trespassing on private property, interfering with lawful construction, disorderly conduct, and attempting to take a police officer's equipment. But the real gem was what happened to the foundation that morning. The cement truck guy refused to delay the pour since the concrete would have been ruined and would have cost thousands to replace. So her panic jog across the slab left 2 perfect shoe prints and a dropped HOA badge that got sealed into the foundation forever. She had also dropped her laminated fake stop work order, which was now a permanent part of my workshop floor. The local news ran a story the next day with the headline "Suburban Showdown, HOA President Tries to Halt Shed Gets Caught in Concrete Consequences." The reporter interviewed 3 neighbors, all of whom said they were not surprised this had happened. I printed out the article and framed it inside the workshop once construction was completed 3 weeks later. Denise was removed from the HOA board after an emergency vote that took less than 18 minutes. The meeting was standing room only, with neighbors I had never even seen before showing up to vote. The vote was 47-3, with the 3 votes in her favor coming from her husband, who looked embarrassed, her mother, who lived 2 streets over and kept insisting Denise was just being thorough, and accidentally from Harold, who pressed the wrong button and immediately asked to change his vote. She was also required by court order to stay 30 feet away from any active construction zone, including her own backyard, for the next 2 years. This became a problem when she needed her roof repaired and had to stay at a hotel during the work. The judge also ordered her to pay $4,800 in damages for the foundation that had to be partially repaired due to her footprints compromising the structural integrity, plus my legal fees of $2,200, and an additional $500 to the county inspector for destruction of government property when she broke his clipboard. When the judge read the total of $7,500, she stood up and shouted that this was a conspiracy between me and big construction. The judge, who had been patient until that point, added another $500 for contempt of court, bringing her total to $8,000. Her face went from red to white as she slumped back into her chair, her lawyer whispering furiously in her ear, finally understanding that her reign of HOA terror had come to an extremely expensive end.